I got that. It's literally taped to my monitor right there. Record. The word record is
Record.
taped to my monitor. So I'll share. We'll get in it. I'm gonna kick us off with our favorite slide again, which is definition of leadership.
Ba-ba-da-ba-ba.
And I'll try to
Okay.
do better today sharing screens and stuff. Apparently yesterday I had a brain infarction at the very end. So
You did?
I did. Well, I only shared the background. I didn't like share the
Oh,
document.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So,
So,
why don't you take it away? Go.
well, who wants to talk about this? This is just us kids. So, Elaine or Sam, do you guys want to take a crack at what's the goal is, by the way, through all of this, and we love that you're here, is not just to impart all this information to you, but to give you the power to impart this information to other individuals as well.
And to use it as a
And
natural state
sometimes
of being.
there's nothing more powerful than to set information in our minds than the last part is always teaching it
Yeah.
and putting it to use. So I would love to hear kind of your impression of this definition, and then we'll get into the give for the sake of what, and we do have a lot to kind of dive deep into today. So we'll kind of go from there. So
Well,
who wants to do it?
I'll,
Elaine,
I'll,
you're
I'll,
up.
I'll dive in. I'll dive in. I'll dive in.
Go.
So it's funny because now after a couple days of seeing this and writing it down for myself and everything else,
Mhm.
yesterday when I was working with some of my team, I realized that's what I was doing when I thought of the three components. But I never think of it that way. I'm just working with my team to get things done because we've got to check the box and keep moving. But that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
And it was see, in the back of my mind, seeing it and feeling it. And so it was kind of like, oh, that's
Ooh.
kind of exciting.
Ooh.
There you go. That's it. That's very cool. I think there are components. Sam and I didn't let you go yet. So Sam, you go, and then I'll add a couple of sentences into this.
Absolutely. I heard, I read something a while back, and I'm trying to remember the group. They defined CEO not as chief executive officer, but chief vision officer, and I think that marries very much with this concept where
Hmm.
administering a vision is about um, having the vision, communicating that vision, but also making sure that the steps are in place that that vision can be um, um, realized and as it's defined here as that worthy ideal. And the CEO or the doesn't have all the answers, but just being able to keep on the path.
Yeah.
Good. Good. Yeah. Nicely. Yeah. Keep on the path. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
We're
kind of
gonna
going
be
back to the whole conversation about flow yesterday. There's a seam in the river. Yeah. And if we can keep ourselves at least marginally close to it, we can move pretty well. And we'll get caught in back eddies sometimes, and that's where you actually need to get the oars out and start moving some things around. Yeah.
I
yeah.
feel like I got a lot of eddies lately.
Yeah, that's the nature of moving into
Oh,
unknown
they're all
territory.
eddies.
Yeah. There are
Whirlpools.
undiscovered territory, man. No, it's funny because so I made a note yesterday. So here's I haven't talked to Blaine about this yet, but I'll make a promise on behalf of Blaine and I, which is which will be me. Um, but I can, I'll include Blaine because we're joined at the hip. The one of the things that I want to send, and I don't know that I'll have it ready for tomorrow. If I don't, I'll make sure I'll send it to you separately, and probably next week. Is I want to create a tool. So it's a thinking tool around the definition of leadership. So when you're heading into a meeting or heading into a conversation, you can ask yourself, what am I influencing?
Mhm.
Who are the others? What are we co-creating? What's coordinated? What's the movement that we're heading towards? And then worthy ideal at the organizational level, and then the worthy ideal at the individual level as it relates to to the people you're talking to. Because which is sometimes complex to be able to answer that question of, because we all have our worthy ideals. At this stage of my life, my worthy ideal is way different than it was 30 years ago. Matter of fact, I'm completely unemployable at this point. So it's an opportunity to kind of step back and break that down and just to say, here are the things. And it's just a real quick little thing to fill out, just kind of say, here's what I'm doing, here's what we're doing. And then as you're implementing that in the team, I think it's an opportunity then to teach them that tool, give them that tool so they can think that way. So you end up with consistency. They understand the context, and we're going to talk about context today. They understand that. So I was thinking about that yesterday, thinking, what could we give you? What could we give you that would help you actually have a tool in your hand to practically apply this? So
Yep.
would that be something of interest? Would you guys like something like that?
And just kind of
Sure.
No, okay, all right. Just otherwise, you could tell me no. Actually, we'd never use it, and you won't hurt my feelings. So my feelings don't get hurt until I'm told I'm short and overweight, and then it's a different problem.
then it's a whole different story.
Then it's a different story. Now I'm upset. Um, let's talk a little bit. I want to spend some time. The great thing about having this intimate group is we can spend a little bit of time talking about for the sake of what. Would love to hear kind of your thinking around, because when we think about from a leadership perspective, most people are schooled in the do manage part, which is outcome driven. And where we're talking about mindset, imagination, spirit, and of course there's the elements of the pillars and all that come into it, but we're talking about those layers. Sometimes the concept around for the sake of what is a little different. So I'm really curious about kind of your take on, oh, there it is right there. I'm getting my thumbs up already. And your take on for the sake of what, and how that applies into your thinking as you're kind of working with the team, that worthy ideal.
Sam, we'll start with you this time.
Well, I've asked myself, why am I doing this? Like, I could just, again, my vision is in creative fields, and it's creating immersive content.
Yeah.
The reason I started this is because on an individual basis, when I was exposed to this immersive field, I thought it would be a really great idea to combine music and art in the spatial environments. And I could have just gone on to do that myself and create a video or whatever, just a one-off, and been happy with that. But I thought that it was such a good idea that it could be undertaken on a global scale. And then as that idea matured, with AI, with everything that was happening in the creative fields, and the fact that I didn't go into a creative field because there wasn't the enumeration that society put on artistic endeavors versus more accepted roles. So I thought it was a great opportunity to create an environment where creativity, in light of all the AI going on and generative AI, can be valued, enumerated, so that collectively artists can actually gain, more so than they would without this. And 85, I'm not sure what the exact number is, but 85% of artists, both visual and music, operate under the poverty line. I don't think that's acceptable. But I think with all this AI stuff that's going on, many jobs are going to be displaced. And it's just anything productive that humanity does today will be done better eventually by the combination of robotics, AI, and machine learning. So I believe wholeheartedly that there has to be a new economy that evolves. And that, I believe, is a creative economy, something that will differentiate us from machine. And that's why I'm doing this.
Good. All right.
So if you paraphrase that down, and we'll just we'll do the same thing, Elaine, tomorrow with you. But so if you paraphrase that down, what's the and you're communicating that there's a what's the one sentence that defines the worthy ideal? By the way, I agree with all of that.
Mhm.
Being a musician myself, knowing that, I see money go that way, very little of it comes this way. Well, actually, I made about $12 last year, so it was a pretty good year. But
It's creating a new economy that will value creativity, for all to gain from, for society to gain from.
okay,
Okay.
yeah, good. So one thing I would encourage is when one of the things around for the sake of what, one of the challenges with for the sake of what is to have that statement in something that just rolls off. This is what which is clear. This is what I'm doing and why. Like mine is empower 1 million leaders. That's mine. I do that through a bunch of different platforms, but my mission is my for the sake of what is to empower 1 million leaders. That's what I do. And most people look at me and go, oh, okay, and walk away. So, um, so yeah, good. Elaine, what's your for the sake of what? Well, I want to spend a moment on this because this is going to matter for the conversation as we talk about the path in a moment.
It's interesting because listening to Sam, I've got, because my two businesses are so distinct, so I'm going to go back to the
Sure.
one in the tattoo industry
Yeah.
because I totally relate to what Sam was saying because I deal with creatives, artists or creatives, and the whole taking the AI, and heaven forbid I used an AI image in one of my social media posts. Did my team come after me or what? But you know, I think for the sake of what matters, I think of the three pillars I have in the business. I started out with I want people to take care of their skin. That's why I have my products. But
Right.
I want to what matters to me is that people understand and are educated because I want to build a community and understanding around what happens in the tattoo industry. Maybe not so much the industry is I'm at this crux of, do I focus on the people who are getting tattoos or the people who are making the tattoos? It's kind of you know, so
Mhm.
what matters to me is that there's an understanding about the industry and I do it through education. So we are one of our taglines for that business, thinking about what you said, Dolan, is defend your ink. And the
Defend.
company's name is Ink Defense. And defend your ink can mean many things. It can be the personal statement, it could be the art, it could be taking care of it. So, for the sake of what? To defend your ink. I mean, I teach people, me, I can't stick in just one lane. I can't just sell a product because I'm about people. And so I I don't know. Is that kind of like sort of you didn't touch on the answer to the question? I'm kind of
Yeah.
wondering.
Sort of, kind of, sort of, yeah, maybe. The so the so again, the reason why I wanted to pause in that, in particularly with the conversation we're gonna step off into today, is really having clarity around that for the sake of what and for the sake of what. And you both hit the nail on the head. The for the sake of what is individualistic and it's people. It's not products, outcomes, numbers, money. For the sake of, those are empowering things that get you someplace, that move you towards something. But the for the sake of what is that people thing. And to your point, Sam, for artists to be able to create and make money. What a novel concept. Right?
Yeah.
And Elaine, to one of my oldest son passed about 12 years ago. He was a tattoo dude, and his ashes are tattooed in my arm. So the there's meaning why that art matters, and to defend defend your ink. I love that statement around
I love that
defending your
statement.
ink, right? He goes with me everywhere I go, but with everybody in the family, he does that. So that's why I think for the sake of what's important, but having clarity on that is incredibly important because that's the the linchpin to implementing the things that we talk about in mindset, imagination, and spirit. The four pillars are the give us some of the hows and the tools to do that. But those three lower pieces of this picture here, mindset, and we'll probably should add imagination someday, and spirit.
Well,
Yeah, we teach it it's in the mastermind there for a long time. But it's that those two spots there. That's the having clarity around that for the sake of what? Really crystal clear.
yeah, I was, in my reading today, I was reading Neville Goddard, and the
Mm,
part of what was, I was working with a whole, and I have been for the last couple of weeks on imagination, just the nature of imagination. And what I came across
nah,
today in the reading was this one: the ability to mentally move from things as they are to things as they ought to be, which is the use of the imagination, is one of the most important discoveries that man can make. To see things not and be held captive by what we see. I see a mountain out there, but I can imagine a thoroughfare or whatever it might be, or I imagine a ski slope, or but it's the use of the imagination that transforms the experience of current reality into a desired state for the sake of, and that's where it comes into play here, which is different than the purpose. And it's different than, Simon Sinek talks about the why,
yeah,
organize everything around a why. Why is perfect. I mean, it's great. And you start asking for the sake of what, you start digging down deeper. It literally gives you a much richer hold on that imagined future state. That for the sake of what, becomes highly personal. And this is literally where we're going today, is personalizing that, transferring, that vision into an actionable state where, yeah, co-created movement, co-created, coordinated movement occurs.
indeed. So
It
let's
was Simon Sinek that said chief vision officer. It was his quote.
Uh-huh.
yeah, that would make that. I've not heard him say that before. That makes sense, Sam. Blaine, you wanna
Context and trust. Yeah. When we're looking at the ACT model, awareness, context, communication, commitment, and trust. Leaders are causing movement all the time. We're looking here not so much at the causation of movement. We're looking at effectiveness in the process. Yeah, a word that I use a lot in the coaching that I do with my clients is is the movement elegant? Is your activity elegant? And what I mean by elegant has nothing to do with sartorial presence. I mean, boy, you look good today. That's not what I'm talking about. If you actually, if you've ever done any coding, software coding, elegant code is code that does exactly what it's supposed to do with minimal to no unintended consequences. It's bug free, basically, is a way of saying this. Far too often, and far too many leaders that we work with have to go back and clean up after themselves a lot. They have this way of causing things to happen that throws people off balance, and now they got to go back and clean up. Elaine, you mentioned, I did an AI generated image, now I got to go back and clean that up. Okay, so it's an awareness, in part awareness of what's the environment in which we're actually operating,
yeah,
and what would be an appropriate, what's too much, what's too little, what's an appropriate positioning. I mean, how do I shape listening, which is a communication piece? How do I shape listening so that they're receptive to hearing what I have to say? This shaping of listening so that they can hear what it is that I'm asking them to do has two major components to it. One is context, which is meaning generation. That's the meaning framing. and then trust. Because when you start moving into the unknown areas, yeah, you better have trust in your hip pocket because people want a certain experience of safety if they're going to leap off that edge, if they're going to take that step of faith. Yeah, you said it's going to be fine. I trust that you're going to, yeah, yeah, that you've got my back as we move into this unknown territory. All of that comes into play here. So, and you can read the slide just as well as we can read it to you, but it's context and trust, mechanism for agility and alignment. Yeah, there's a good friend of mine, Stephen Covey Jr., the son of Stephen Covey, wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. And when you have trust in place, things can move pretty quickly. People aren't looking over their shoulders. They're not kind of contracted, because they're afraid. I mean, that sort of stuff. So agility and alignment. Context provides alignment. Trust creates the environment for agility, for speed, which includes course correcting. Yeah. Yeah. When I was working with Nokia, and I spent 12 years leading their major function of their leadership development globally, I would talk to people about, there's two aspects when change is afoot. One is how do you lead people through trust, and then how do you manage the change process? Or not lead people through change, not trust. How do you lead people through change? People need to have a certain experience of, like I said, safety. So rather than saying we're going this way, it's going to be fine, you say we're going to go this way, and we've got about an 80% certainty that this pathway is going to work for us. 80%. People, a number, that's all it is. It's just a number that I pulled out of thin air, but it's a number that gives them a sense of, okay, 80%, I can work with 80%. It also gives the leader permission to come back and say, that 80%, well, there was a 20% variance here. We just ran into that variance. We're going to course correct a little bit. People go, oh, okay, understand. Contextually, they make sense out of a shift. Yeah, that is going to be required as you start moving yourself forward here. So that agility and alignment piece are one of the ways that both context and trust begins to address that. Empowerment through understanding. People go, oh, okay, got it. Understand now. Yeah, 80% isn't certain. It's not 100%. We can work with this. So when you provide that kind of a context, people can make informed decisions and they can actually get on board with different choices than what we originally signed up for. Instead of hearing, well, you said it was going to be, they kind of go, oh, okay, 80%.
Yeah.
I guess we can back this out and look at some other options. So that's kind of how this works. When you set context and when you have trust in place. Yeah. And in the mastermind, we'll spend, literally these two domains in the ACT model. Context, we spend 2.5 months on. Trust, we spend 2 months on. Just what is it? How do you build it? How do you recover it? Context, how do you define it? How do you actually communicate it effectively so people have an understanding of how it works? What's their part in it? What's the framing? All of that stuff comes into play.
Which is a nice segue to the next one.
Exactly. It's a bridge between vision and execution. You want to take this one?
Sure. So when we're gonna get into it. There's another slide. We're gonna start talking about some flow and things to expect kind of through that from a resilience perspective, from a resistance perspective, not resilience. That was yesterday. But when we're as leaders, right, we cause movement. Our role in the organization as that chief vision officer, to your point, Sam, I love that definition. We'll adopt that for today and tomorrow. But as we do that, we cause movement, which is how do we take how do we move the vision, the idea, the concept that the team has bought in on because we've co-created it, we've not dictated it. It's not that guy that I saw in the quad saying this is another effing brilliant idea and this too shall pass and I'm gonna wait. Or the meeting that ends with everybody at the water cooler going, well, that was nuts. We'll never get this done. They're in on the vision. How do you move it into execution? And context is that ability, and both of you are in this role. Or matter of fact, everybody on this, Totosan is in it. James is in it. You guys are in the role of, so how do you move that vision into actionable steps that that move towards that worthy ideal? There's an outcome, yes, that's a component of it, but how do you do that? And context and trust are key critical pieces that the team, and then, sorry, choked on some coffee. It's a bad meeting habit to drink coffee in the middle of a meeting. But it's a key important step when you're thinking about that gap, that bridging between vision and execution. That context is what that connection, that linchpin that adds meaning to vision and Greek empowers people, gives people permission. Empowerment is really the word permission, gives people permission to create actionable steps, to imagine new ideas through trust, to know that you've got their back and they can take steps to move forward, that they're willing to work together and willing to commit and be accountable. Blaine and I are talking today at noon. If you get bored, you want to hear more Blaine and Dolan today, we're on at noon at LinkedIn today, noon Pacific, talking about systems of accountability for about an hour today. And then the psychological safety, we've talked about that every day so far. And that is that single player game with trust. First, I have to trust me that I'm willing to empower my team. I'm willing to give my team permission to go try. And if I trust me in that environment, then that individual that I'm empowering, that I'm giving permission to, has to trust themselves. So members feel safe to ask questions. They know that it's the difference between, I just wrote a blog about this a couple of weeks ago. It's the difference between critiquing and teaching.
Mm-hmm.
When someone comes to you and they says, well, this is where we are on your team, and you say, well, here's what I would have done. You've shifted to critique mode to, rather than a question of help me understand how or why, so that it gives them that ability to collaborate in a solution, and you're going to guide them to where your experience can help them be. But that's that psychological safety part, which is fosters that environment where they can feel safe asking you questions, talking to you. Prior company role, chief operating officer, good sized company, about a $70 million business, 120 some odd employees in my care and custody. And one of the challenges that we faced in one of the components of the organization was the mercurial nature. I won't mention the organization by name, the mercurial nature of a bipolar executive who, when you go into the meeting, you would get like that, and then they would back out and come back and go, well, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean to call you, a moron. And here's what we're going to do. And eventually that eroded the ability for the team to have psychological safety to be able to come in and trust. And what we saw was projects fell off the rails. Momentum stopped. Outcomes stopped. Because if I have a problem, I'm going to get this. I'm not going to get support. So it's very important to build that kind of environment. In particularly,
When we're moving
was
through
that a good
change.
segue? Was that a good segue? Did you want to
That's
add
a
anything
perfect
to that
segue.
before I segue?
Yes. The path through change. Yeah. You'll see this S curve sort of a thing in a number of different models around change.
Yes.
The way we're labeling this, excuse me, I've got your coffee thing here going on. We establish the vision, then the goals are defined that will enable that vision to occur. What's the strategic way that is going to allow us to implement on that? So we decide on the plans for implementation. Then the tactical components come into play, which is the day-to-day activities. And then, we measure, are we doing it or not? Are we hitting the mark or not? This is where the KPIs come in, all that kind of stuff. So this is a pathway through change. Now, if you overlay something else on this, what you see is when change is first introduced, just know that this is true, regardless of what people are saying or any head nodding that you might see. The moment you introduce a change into an organization, you introduce resistance. by definition, people do not like change, even if it makes sense, because it disrupts the status quo. It disrupts the experience of feeling comfortable. Okay. Everybody just quickly, just fold your arms in front of your chest. Just cross your arms. Easy to do. No thinking about it at all. Yeah. Matter of fact, it feels kind of good. Now do it the other way. You have to kind of stop and think about it a little bit. It doesn't feel comfortable in the same way that the other one did. Now, when you introduce change, you're asking people to fold their arms in a different way. The lack of comfort is what they're paying attention to physiologically and emotionally and intellectually. It just doesn't fit like it used to. So the vision may be attractive. The vision might be something that they value, and you can make a business case for it. But there's underneath the visible, there's all kinds of other stuff going on. That's what we want to work with, because that's where mindset is doing its mischief. That's where mindset's in play.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
that's what we're going to be looking at in these next couple of slides. And this is actually going to inform the homework, the acceleration uh, tools that we're going to be giving you here in a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's interesting you say that. One thing that I don't want to lose track of it. That's important
Yeah.
that we mentioned yesterday too, and you kind of just touched on it. One is that so since the great thing about leadership is it involves other people. It would be so cool if it was just us, right? We didn't have to worry about other people. It'd be lonely, but it would be that way. But when you're leading other individuals, a lot of times people have an attitude of I'm going to implement change in my organization at the avoidance of discomfort and avoidance of conflict.
Hmm.
And people will be uncomfortable because we like what we wear. We like how we did it. We talked yesterday about, and just crossing your arms just now. As a leader, there's a natural desire to I'm gonna implement a plan and structure that avoids conflict. And we're gonna spend time talking specifically about that. Conflict is a natural component of it and is a positive experience. So when you're implementing the strategies and plans inside of your organization through change, don't avoid conflict. It's that you did this earlier in the week, right? Rub your hands together, feel heat, feel friction. Friction creates light, and then your hands burst into flames. Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. It's interesting. Without friction, you have no movement.
that's
I mean, just
true.
imagine, when you're walking on a sheet of ice. Yeah. You don't get very far very fast when you're walking on a sheet of ice. Sam, you're probably familiar with this more than anybody else in Colorado. So
Go
you
Leafs,
need
go.
friction to
Yeah.
get traction. You need friction to get traction, and traction is an indication that movement is happening. Okay, I've got traction. Then it's a question of which direction am I moving? Yeah, how
Yeah.
elegant do I look while I'm doing it? I mean, all that stuff. Yeah. So think of
Right.
Bambi, going across that sheet of ice with Thumper going, "You can do it! You can do it!"
We'll have to find that video somewhere.
So I've got a copy of it.
I know you do. That's all
I
right.
sent that to you at one point in time.
I have it. I do. I save everything you send to me, sort of.
Here
Then
we go.
here we
Mindset.
go. Resistance on that note. Dun, 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 dun. Mr. Bartlett.
When we're looking at vision here, this is these next two slides, we're going to be looking at each of these six little pieces in this S curve. The resistance that oftentimes will show up when we're starting to make declarations about the future is a fear of thinking too big. What would people think of me? Do they think this is audacious? Uh, yeah, am I getting too far in front of my people? Um, yeah, and really one of the biggest pitfalls here is, and this is a universal mindset, is wanting to know how it's going to happen before you ever embark on the journey. Yeah, yeah. What's Mike Dooley call this? No, oh God, I can't remember the word he uses around this, but the damnation of the how. I'll just kind of
Ah,
use my own phrase here. Yeah, when you introduce a vision, the last thing in the world you want to have people talking about is how are we going to do it? That is not the time for that conversation. When you introduce the vision, Think of Kennedy back in 1962. We're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. The decade. I'll put my Boston accent in here. He didn't
There you
talk
go.
about how we were going to do it. He just planted a flag. When we're looking at the ability to mentally move from things as they are to things as they ought to be, that's flag planting. That's what's going on there. That's flag planting. It's kind of like, that's the mountaintop we're going to move towards. How we're going to do that, we haven't even explored the terrain yet. So the mindset that comes into play here that keeps people from setting large visions for themselves, for their organizations, is essentially this. Yeah, I don't know how to do it, and maybe it's too big. Maybe it's too big. What will people think of me? So there's a sense of identity that comes into play here. And coupled right into that is this belief about my ability to inspire others. If I can't tell them how, yeah, where's the inspiration? And if I don't believe it myself, if I'm really got questions about it, where's the inspiration? Because everything's energy. It's always moving through energy. Everything is energetic. And I communicate my how, or my where, my what, my for the sake of what, energetically before I ever open my mouth. When we start developing goals, yeah. How did you learn about responsibility? I'll just kind of put it in this language here. For most of us, and I'll answer the question that I've just tossed out here,
There
it
you go.
starts pretty early on. When I'm 3 or 4 years old, I'm roughhousing with my siblings, and we're wrestling on the floor or something, and one of us knocks a lamp off the table. And mom comes in, she hears the crash and says, "Who's responsible for this?" And responsibility real early on gets linked to blame. Responsibility and blame. Who's responsible for this? Who's to blame for this? So people have an innate resistance to saying yes to something, to committing to something. Are you in on this or not? Uh-huh. Well, uh-huh is not a yes. Yeah, uh-huh is not a declaration that you can count on me. You can take this to the bank. That linkage between responsibility, accountability, and blame is really pervasive. So when you get low yeses, low quality yeses, execution becomes a real question. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. You're managing a chain of commitments. You're never managing to a result. You're managing a chain of commitments. And that's what we want to pay attention to, is the quality of yeses that you get from the people that are being asked to produce that end result. So doubt in education, this is trust comes into play here. Leaders may hesitate to set ambitious goals because they don't feel the team will be able to deliver. I don't trust that they can do it. Really, what I'm saying is I don't trust myself to handle the consequence of making that bold declaration and then doing what needs to be done to make it happen. That's kind of what's going into play there. From a strategic perspective, when we start identifying the pathway to where we're heading, I was doing some work with NASA years ago, and there are different kinds of conversations that happen in meetings. And there's communicating for action, communicating for problem solving, communicating for analysis, communicating for, there's about 4 major conversations that will generally take place in in a meeting setting. And what happens most frequently is that you've got at least three of those conversations going on at the same time. Somebody's looking for data. Tell me what happened here. Somebody else is looking, well, let's just get into action here. Somebody else is looking at, have we really explored all possibilities, brainstorming. And if you don't have this conversational discipline, you start getting paralysis by analysis. The mindset is overthinking and fear of making the wrong move. And it shows up in the different kinds of conversations that are allowed to happen in meetings. So part of what you want to be able to do here is, this is how you begin to address this belief of feeling unqualified to make strategic choices. You need to know what conversation you're asking people to participate in. Is this a brainstorming conversation where we're just looking at possibilities for how? We're not going to talk about we're not going to vet the possibilities. We're just going to generate possibilities. for how we do this. Then we can have a vetting conversation. Okay, so we shift the tone. All of that starts to come into play. Okay, so there's mindset, and then there's the belief that that is embedded in that mindset. So you can take the macro and then the micro view of this. So when you start looking, how do you lead people through change? How do you cause movement most elegantly? Vision, goals, strategy. Here are a set of milestones that you can pay attention to. A set of symptoms would be one way of thinking about this. When this
Yeah.
begins to appear, just know that this is going on. Okay.
Which is an elegant transition to
The last
Da-da-da.
set of
So,
three. Doctor.
yeah, you give, which is, and I'll kind of touch on these just from that perspective. So one thing I would encourage is as we're going through these, and you guys will have all of these slides and all the content. We're going to give it all to you tomorrow. But as we're going through it, it also helps you pre-think. There's a great book out there called Persuasion, written by this guy Robert Cialdini, which is the psychology of marketing. But it has one of the things in leading through strategy and leading through change is pre-thinking. And then it's an opportunity to flip these the other way. What am I afraid of? Why am I afraid of commitment? I saw your comment, Elaine, on analysis paralysis, right? I'm going to analyze it until it's dead. And by the way, then the opportunity is gone. So flip these and use them as tools as arrows in your quiver for planning. One of the things that I love there's a statement in planning that I taught my team. When you think of rigid thinking and from a mindset, one of the very first things I would teach people is answer this question: we can if. Because when we plan and we're building that plan going forward, there are things that we either will do more or less of. Otherwise, we end up stacking. So we can if the focus on this plan is we need to move these other things. So it's plans. There's that pebble in the pond again with ripples coming out from that pebble impact. So it's the ability to analyze your thinking from the plan and stepping away from the fact that it's not going to be perfect. We sometimes, and I've been guilty of this, we want the plan to be perfect, and we believe that perfection in the plan creates commitment. Perfection in the plan does not create commitment. Vulnerability in the plan creates commitment. So being imperfect creates that willingness for people to co-create with you and take ownership. And then, of course, I call it lack on this slide. I don't know why I changed the word to lack on these slides. I don't know what happened there. I must have been too much coffee. Uh, but the belief is, again, about you, but on not being able to lead execution. And that's a misnomer because as a leader, that's this moment. I'm gonna run this thing and I'm gonna lead the execution of this, which is micromanagement. I'm not sure I can lead this thing. So you want to make sure that the team really is, they have permission to proceed. You're vulnerable, that you've co-created this together. And tactics. From a tactics perspective, there is, again, we talked a little bit before about this, and I'm not going to kind of dive back into it. But tactics are fear of change. It's not just also change, but it's the fear of sometimes admitting what I don't know. I don't know how to do some things. So as a leader, we can feel as if I'm comfortable. What got me here is going to get me to where I need to be in the future, which is not the law. What got me here today will not get me to where I need to be in the future. So as a leader, it's relinquishing that fear, defeating that fear to allow less perfection. Again, kind of going back to that concept and thinking of new ways to working, which again is trust and giving people permission to go try. Kaizen, we talked, Elaine, you mentioned it yesterday in our conversation around fall 9, rise 10, fall 7, rise 8. It's that opportunity for people to be empowered to go try, make, and be imperfect. and then lack of trust and delegation. And as a leader, the I'll ask you guys this question in each of your organizations. And I know, Sam, you've got a small team that you're working with. You mentioned yesterday, and Elaine, you've got two different kinds of teams, that you're working with. When you are working with those teams, are you using the power of one-on-ones that are not work related? Explain. I see Elaine shaking her head yes. So what does that mean to you, Elaine?
Well, it, I develop a kind of a personal relationship with my this is my core team,
Mhm.
kind of, what's going on in their life, and humanize the relationship is what it does. And I'll send pictures to my one admin just out of the blue because I know it's something that we both have in common. Happens to be flowers, and you know, it has nothing to do with what we do, but it I learned that from you, okay? It makes the relationship work.
It
Right.
does. It's all a relationship. Everything is a
Yeah.
relationship.
Keyword. Yeah.
Relationship. Almost every meeting, I'm going to say almost every, roughly 95% of the meetings that take place in organizations are about the how are we doing? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Are we on
Yeah.
track? You want to periodically kind of interrupt that pattern and have a conversation about who are we being while we're doing what we're doing? Who are we being while we're doing what we're doing? That's the relational question. Who are we being with each other? Who are we being with each other?
Yeah.
And if you can just kind of keep that in your leadership quiver, and once a month you kind of have a who are we being conversation. That becomes a very interesting way to create relational currency that can serve you well, particularly when you move into some uncharted territory and something has knocked you off base.
Yeah.
So the trust, it actually generates, interpersonal trust. Who are we being with each other?
Yeah. And then and thank you, by the way, for the tip. That's been a long standing thing I believe firmly in when we're working with our teams. There was a matter of fact, there is a great tool out there, and I don't know, Sam, if you've ever found these guys out there. It's a company, it's a podcast called Manager Tools, and they have this thing called the one-on-one. It's a format for a one-on-one, and it's a neat format on how to hold that conversation. Um, they've been around forever and ever and ever and ever. But it is that, and thank you, Elaine. It is that ability to build trust. One of the challenges, and it happened in both of these in tactics and in measures, are very, very all of this is so closely linked together. But there is this belief, and I did it was on a podcast in March, which was cool. It was a 3 hour interview. It was like a Dan Bongino kind of an interview. It was like mother of pearl. It was exhausting. Um, with a podcast called Strong Like Bull. And at the end of the podcast, off camera, we were talking, and one of the gentlemen who was interviewing me mentioned, well, here's how it works in my company. Nobody can do it as good as I can. So therefore, and I
There
kind
you
of,
go, Elaine. Yep.
and I immediately kind of said, so we've been talking for like 3 hours. Did you hear nothing I said in 3 hours? Did you miss like everything we talked about? So there is that's a real thing. And I mentioned earlier about that manager or that person who comes in hot with rah and then backs out. That's their propensity. If you didn't do it the way I would do it, and therefore because you didn't do it the way I would do it, I'm going to demean you for it and then go, well, maybe your idea wasn't so bad. At that point, you've inflicted harm and you can't recover it. And then measures, mindset again, just that fear of accountability. And a lot of people have a fear of an uncomfortable truth. We've missed the mark. And fear compounds when we don't trust.
Yeah. One of the things around that mindset around avoiding accountability, check this out with yourself. I am my results.
Good,
I am
good
my
quote.
results. And whatever is being produced out there is a reflection on me. Man, that mindset can get you in trouble real quickly for
Oh
some of the
boy.
reasons that we're identifying here. I mean, I don't want to shine a light on that because it reflects back on me poorly. Yeah, all of that stuff kind of comes in, and it's a mindset. It's a very subjective and subliminal sort of a dynamic that can come through in some very pernicious ways if you're not paying attention to it.
Yeah. That's such a yes. And we get hung up on it. It's easy to get hung up on it because it's personal.
Mhm.
I missed the mark, therefore I must not be good. And I'm not going to tell you because I don't want you to know I'm not good. Therefore,
Yeah.
I'm just going to not tell you things. And then again, which is symptomatic in teams, by the way, when we have teams not communicating with it, this is an indicator for a symptom of why they're not talking to you
Yeah.
about their outcomes because it's tied to their belief in their own I am my results. And of course, last bullet, and we'll get off of this because I want to get to a worksheet, is doubting what success looks like with hooks all the way back to the previous slide when we're talking about vision. And for the sake of what? Without clarity there, at that very first step, we end at the last step with a complete doubt in what success looks like. It's a full circle, full life.
There's another piece to this too. One is the success metric, which is here's what the promised land looks like. Okay.
Yep.
We've arrived, and here's how we know we arrived because this is now what we're working with. So that's one metric, and that's the one that's most typically put in front of people. You also have succeeding metrics, and these are little milestone, little chunks in this, so you're actually linking metrics back to goals, back to objectives, back to vision. And it's all part of a whole puzzle piece. Everything has to have meaning connected to what preceded it. So if vision is one thing, then you have the goals, then you have the objectives. So each one of those little pieces has a metric associated with it. And the objectives tend to be very specifically time defined. By this time, we will have this accomplished. And it feeds into this goal because there's probably about 4 or 5 objectives that need to be done well. That's this chain of commitments that need to be done well so that this goal is achieved. This goal conspires with other goals that we've set for ourselves that ultimately generates this vision. So there's this bifurcation, there's this trickle down or trickle up that you want to be paying attention to. Measuring that stuff can be, as the slide says here, busy work can be seen as busy work, but it's really a way that you begin to bring accountability and transparency into what it is that you're doing and asking people to work with. And it's one way that you begin to introduce kind of a sense of certainty, which translates into safety if you're doing it
Yeah.
well, if you're actually working it well.
Yeah. That's always believe KPIs, whatever you want to call them, KPIs, OKRs, all kinds of stuff. At the end of the day, they fortify trust because it re-implements that opportunity to collaborate. So that's as we walk through and there's a lot, we can only do so much in an hour or so, but from when we think about this S curve, which is change, and this is not company strategy, but every change goes through, there's a vision around the change, goals, strategy, plan, tactics, measures around any change. And so we wanted to just provide these to you just as thinking points for this whole process. But we do have a worksheet.
Worksheet. Hey,
Surprise.
Brian,
Surprise. Hey, Brian. All right.
saw you lurking in the background here. Good to
So
have you here.
he's been
Thank
there.
you.
I know you've been here. You joined us some time ago. You've been off
Yeah.
camera.
Yes.
That's good.
Yes. I've been here.
I know you have. This is good.
So I just put the worksheet in the chat. And I'm gonna share my screen briefly just to look at the worksheet, and we're gonna pause and take a few minutes just to start working with this. And I'm going to click share, and then I'm going to confirm with Blaine. I actually didn't just share my screen, right? I shared the document.
You got the worksheet.
Perfect. That's what I wanted. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to, before we hit the timer on it, on the third page of the worksheet is a topic we don't talk about here.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to give you a 1 minute snapshot of looking at this, the decision. I've been talking since 5:30 this morning. The decision making, I call it the pinwheel or flywheel. Just a model very quickly to use is everything starts with your for the sake of what, clarity around your for the sake of what. The next is the decision that if the thing that we're deciding on is in alignment with our mission and core values, does it contribute to our primary goal? What's our cost? And cost is people, time, or money. What's our cost? Do we have, and Elaine, to your point of analysis paralysis, do we have 80% of the information needed? At 80%, call the ball. Close enough. There's this guy somewhere up in Washington. His name was Jeff Bezos. 1997 shareholders meeting. He talked specifically about how Amazon makes decisions. Today, that number's a little lower, but at that point in time, it was 80. The last question is if we say yes or no, what's the opportunity cost? Which ties to we can if. What are we gaining and what are we giving up? Because we can't focus on all things. So the intention was to give you this as part of a decision matrix, and Blaine and I did 6 power reviews on just this topic, I think.
Yeah, just 6. Yeah,
Anyway,
power.
it's out there. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I don't have
it's on my YouTube channel.
yeah, so I don't have it might be on mine too. I don't have to look. I don't have a tool to give you on this, but just at a very high level. On the worksheet, and pardon my scrolling quickly, we'll dive into the worksheet. It's an opportunity to begin to ask these questions. What's the primary purpose of your vision? What's my for the sake of what? Which is that clear statement on the for the sake of what? Goals and objectives. When we talk about goals and objectives, why just one? And I say, why just one? And we don't need to admit the note taker there. They're automatically showing up. Why just one is when we know when we get up in the morning and we write down 10 goals, how many goals are we going to do? 10 things to do today, 10 tasks. How many tasks do we do? 2, 1. Oh, look at I got balloons.
Yeah, one more time.
2, 1. We can't. So our focus is what's the goal? What's the one thing that causes the most change, the most momentum? That's our focus on on our goals. And the rest of the questions you've got. So I want to set a timer. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Mr. Bartlett, what do you think for a timer? What would you
Well, it's 10:01.
you want to do like 5 minutes?
5 minutes at the most. Yeah.
Yeah, to take a crack at it. Just start it, and then we'll
Again,
come back and
first thought,
we'll
best
close
thought.
out.
First thought,
So
best thought.
there we go. So I'm going to go into my apps and close out the chat and apps and start a timer. Start a 5 minute timer and let's have a little music too. What do you think? We should actually, Sam should be providing the music.
Hey, I can do that for sure.
There you go.
I hope it agrees with everybody's musical taste. So.
There you go.
I'm wearing a
We'll see.
Metallica t-shirt.
There
I consider
we
it
go.
part of my uniform.
There we go. All right, music's on. There we go.
Two. 31. What is the
About 1 minute left.
There we go.
Love that. And we've officially joined in the negative time. There we go. Such a cool feature. I've never figured out how we can end up in negative time. Oh, so that's our day today.
Take this worksheet and keep it, because when we go to the 30-day plan tomorrow and you get this 9-pound document, you're going
Oh
to be
my.
wanting to use these little seeds that you've been planting in these little worksheets to flesh out this 30-day plan.
There's everybody still going.
Yeah,
Good. That's good. At this point,
I think we're done.
I think
for
we're
today.
done.
Unless anybody has questions or comments or just general observations that they'd like to leave us with. If not, we'll just see everybody at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning,
we'll warm
Pacific
out.
time.
Last day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow morning. Good to see everybody. James,
Thank
have a
you.
good night.
Take care,
Toast
guys.
son.
Thanks for being here.
Bye, everybody.